A very warm good afternoon to all the participants who have joined here today. It gives me immense pleasure and privilege to welcome all of you to this very important session, specifically named as the teething issues pertaining to your e-invoices. So you're all aware this e-way bill, when it was launched, the whole idea behind it, and I'm sure all the speakers here will agree, the whole idea was that it should be a seamless transit of your goods from without any checkposts, without any stops. But whether practically this is the impact, we'll get an insight today, not only from the industrial leaders who are experts in their own field in each industry that they are representing today, but we also have with us the Indirect Tax Committee Chairman, and we also have a very leading tax professional and chartered accountant with us, CA Sunil Gabhawala sir, who has been working very closely with the government and also a moderator who's an expert in all of this. So I now welcome our chairman of SIRC, CA Dungachan Jain, who's normally from Madurai, but today he is joining us live from Chennai, in fact, from the chairman's room. So I welcome him to deliver his welcome address. Chairman, over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Abhishek. I welcome you all to an important CP meeting on the teething issues on invoices. The topic which we thought will be more relevant because there are a lot of challenges and issues which are being faced by this. I heard there are integration issues, there are bifurcation issues between B2B and B2C invoices, and cancellations which generally you can do the way you want is not going to be that easy in this e-invoicing era. There are issues relating to system stability. Many a time we have seen GST side has kind of put into trouble. So with these challenges, how we are going to kind of take things forward, and rightfully we thought we'll call people from industry who can share their experiences, also can get pose their difficulties what they are facing. And in these lines, we thought we'll have our Indirect Committee Chairman, C. Rajendra Kumar sir also, who will give us the opening remarks. So welcome all the panelists and all the delegates for this program, so that you all take home the issues which the industry is facing, and we can kind of hear from the expert how things can be overcome as well. Abhishek, over to you again.
Thank you, Chairman. A very nice welcome address provided by you. And now, to complement that welcome address, I request the Chairman of the Indirect Tax Committee of the ICAI, CA Rajendra Kumar, who's not only representing as a chairman of the IDT, but he is a person who specializes in indirect taxes and has a lot of practical experience as well from a professional point of view. So I request you, Rajendra Kumar sir, to please share your words of wisdom.
Thank you, CA Dr. Abhishek Murali, the Secretary of the SIRC of ICAI, esteemed Chairman of the SIRC and my very good friend CA Dungachan Jain, the moderator and very eminent faculty Ganesh Prabhu, the panelist, again my good friend Manikandeshwaran, CA K. Balasubramanian, Sunil Gabhawala ji from Mumbai, Kishore Raj Singh, and all other esteemed participants. Yesterday, when our Honorable Chairman called me and directed me that I should be present giving the inaugural talk in this particular program, I had no option but to accept it. Currently, I am on a very important work of our institute in Jaipur, and I'll be returning back tomorrow. But having received the direction of my home region chairman, I had no other option but to be present, and here I am today. I'm very happy that SIRC has taken a lead in organizing a program on e-invoicing. In fact, the concept of e-invoicing is now prevalent in few countries of the world, including India. But what is very significant about India is that among all the world countries, India is the only largest country with a large amount of e-invoicing being generated, given its size of population. And currently, when the turnover is more than 500 crores, India being largest, India will become super largest when the turnover of 100 crores and above registered persons will be brought into this ambit. See, I have heard professionals talking that more amount of electronicization, more amount of processes being electronically done, the professional's role becomes limited. When I do not beg to disagree completely, but as we grow, there will be two kinds of practitioners that India will then have. One kind of practitioners will be on the implementation side, the procedural aspects. The other practitioners will be on the policy side, that is law and consulting. In countries like our major countries in Europe, you have one more stream. You have those who deal only with refunds, because Europe is a conglomeration of about 30 odd countries. And the VAT payments, the Indian GST is known as European VAT there. The VAT payments made into one country from another country being refundable. And in certain countries, the refund is not granted to the account of the registered person, but refund is given to the account of the practitioner or the person who is the consultant. It flows through that channel. So as we proceed, esteemed friends, it is not that the opportunities will decrease. It will not that the opportunities will decline. We will have to upgrade ourselves. We will have to graduate from a caterpillar to a butterfly. That would what I would say in GST. In fact, the e-invoicing schema was supplied to the GSTN by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. And I am proud that the chairman, or what we call the CEO of GSTN, Prakash Kumar, time and again has acknowledged the role played by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India in developing the schema of e-invoicing. So if e-invoicing is successful, the institute should take credit. If the e-invoicing is not so successful, the institute should act in tandem with the government to ensure that it is successful. See, generally what happens is, you find in the social media, people talking ill about ICAI, people talking in not so good words about the elected representatives, which includes the Dungarchan Jain and CA Dr. Abhishek Murali also, because they are also elected representatives. But rarely you will find any appreciations. See, they say in Tamil, no, the truth takes time to take roots, while the lies spread like wildfire. But then once the truth has taken strong roots, I don't think anyone can uproot it. In fact, ICAI is continuously working with the government, especially the GST and Indirect Taxes Committee. And in this year, as my chairman, we have continued the legacy. I don't take any credit for having done this, having done that, and I don't put a crown over myself. We continue the legacy left by the past chairman, and we build upon those legacies to have a creditable future, not only for the professionals, but for this nation as a whole, for the industry as a whole. Because we are Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, who are a creation of the Parliament of India. We have been created by the lawmakers of this country. We are regulators of the profession of chartered accountancy in India, and also facilitators to our members, facilitators to this nation. When GSTN celebrated 1 year of its incorporation, they invited the institute. They honored the institute for the supportive role that the institute played in GSTN's formation and the working of the GSTN. The Honorable President and Vice President were specially invited, and a very nice plaque was given to them, commending the services of the institutes. Who puts this in Facebook? Who puts this in Twitter? Who puts this in WhatsApp? How many of us know that the ICAI was responsible for the schema of invoicing? Do we do that? No. But people put lies, people put words which are false, people instigate tensions that this is happening, that is happening, and all those stuff. But let me tell you, friends, this is the truth. What we do, we don't say. But then someone said, Seivadai solluvom, solluvadai seivom. And here I am telling you what ICAI has done. Here I am telling you the important role the institute has played. Whether DC Jain or Abhishek Murli don't have any work. In these corona times, from Madurai, DC Jain has come to Chennai. In fact, his family would have certainly prevented him. Now, Chennai kalam pogadappa, it is Deepavali time and corona is more and all those stuff. But then they have come for institute's cause. He has come for the purposes of the institute's work to Chennai. Esteemed friends, all the elected representatives are doing great job. And our panelists who are here, it is not that they don't have work. It is not that they are jobless people who are sitting here. And Ganesh Prabhu at this young age has been graduated to a moderator by DC Jain. In fact, he has many years to go before he becomes a perfect moderator. And I only wish to see him as a great moderator in the days to come. And our eminent faculty who are going to deliberate today. Sirs, I thank you very much. I also sincerely request you that if there are any teething issues as has been identified in your presentations, please send it to our committee, gst@icai.in. And let me tell you, there is a hotline between the GST and Indirect Taxes Committee and all arms of GST in this country, the GST Council, the CBIC, the GSTN, and all the state GST commissioners. Mark my words when I say there is a hotline. As soon as you tell us something, we immediately take it up and our issues are heard. Our grievances to the extent possible are addressed. Or we are told that why these certain parts will not be taken up, because India is a large country and what happens in one part of the country may not be relevant at all in another part of the country. So esteemed friends, I wish this program a grand success. I am told 1,000 plus audience have joined, which shows enormous interest in what is e-invoicing and how it is going to play a major role. We have very, very eminent panelists here from important industries who are going to deliberate, and it is my esteemed privilege to be on this particular webinar, inaugurating it, and thanking the chairman CA DC Jain, Abhishek Murali, our esteemed panelist, and also Gabhawala ji, who has especially come from Mumbai on this platform, and Ganesh Prabhu for his moderation. Wish you all happy learning and happy festivities in the coming times. Happy Diwali. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rajendra Kumar sir. A very nice address that you have shared with us. And I think on that note, we can straight away proceed to today's program. The structure, we'll have Sunil Gabhawala sir give a brief presentation first, and then we'll proceed to the session of discussion. So in order to allow a free flow of exchange of thoughts, we have decided we'll introduce all the guests who are present today at the first itself and allow them to exchange their ideas, their thought process, and what they expect from us as chartered accountants, the role that we can play, and the moderator who will be guiding us through this discussion. So I'll first now introduce CA Sunil Gabhawala. He's a chartered accountant in practice, and he secured the All India 3rd rank. And he is also a cost accountant, and he has an excellent academic record with constant rank holder and consistent rank holder throughout his life. In fact, he started his career in indirect tax practice in the sales tax law, the erstwhile sales tax law. And in the very early days of his career, he helped clients transition from sales tax to VAT. In fact, he is then diversified into the service tax practice, where he prepared a comprehensive treatise on service tax, which was published by Bharat Law House and has been published now for almost 24 editions continuously. He has been actively involved in the policy formation of GST as well, and he keenly follows developments and is constant touch with the various government authorities. In fact, he has a YouTube channel which has various videos on GST and how as a chartered accountant or how as a business you can learn from it. And he's mentored so many people pan-India and has an entire community of indirect tax professionals who regularly seek advice and representation from him. So he is also a very successful professional. Thank you so much, Sunil ji, for accepting our invitation to be here with us today. I will next introduce J. Manikandeshwaran. He is currently working as a general manager of finance in the TVS Motor Company Limited and is a mathematics graduate and completed a CA and cost accountancy course. He has more than 25 years of industrial experience, out of which more than 20 years he has been associated with the TVS group. He is handling and leading the financial accounting and indirect taxes matters, and in fact associated with the teams with external audit consultants, other consultants, and he's implemented very successfully GST in TVS Motors, which is one of the biggest organizations in India. With the help of his internal IT team and the tax team, he successfully implemented the e-way bill, the e-way invoicing, e-invoicing, and has ensured 100% compliance to the GST provisions. So that's a huge feather on his cap. And thank you so much, Manikandeshwaran sir. I know you have a very busy schedule and you gracefully accepted to join us here today. Our next speaker will also be our other panelist, profile of CA Kishore Raj Singh. He has more than 28 years experience in manufacturing industries. He worked in fact with Kirloskar for 6 years in Bangalore on imports and exports. For 20 years, he was with Bosch Limited in Bangalore, a leading auto components manager, and he was there as a senior general manager in indirect taxes. He is currently with Ashok Leyland and is holding the profile of a general manager of indirect taxes for the past 2 years. I think Kishore Singh ji, his video is not working, so he is there in audio. Thank you so much, Kishore sir, for accepting our invitation to be here today. Even though we cannot see you, I think your audio and your thoughts will communicate very, very clearly to all of our members as to what you feel. I will next.
Thanks, Mr. Abhishek. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I will now introduce Mr. K. Balasubramanian. He is currently working with Wipro and he's been there since April 2002 and is heading the global corporate tax function. And his designation is Vice President and Global Head of Corporate Tax and has more than 20 years of hands-on experience in the industry, especially with regard to corporate tax compliance across various tax jurisdictions, including India, US, Europe, and Asia Pacific. He regularly addresses on the structuring requirements for their entire group and cross-border mergers and acquisitions, transfer pricing, employee taxation, EU VAT, social security issues, and in fact, he led India in the GST integration and implementation. So he has front-ended many audits and settlements with various tax authorities across the world. And in fact, he regularly participates even with their institute. He is a co-chairman in the Direct Taxation Committee of the Bangalore chapter. He's a member of the Taxation Committee of the Confederation of Indian Industry, part of the core team of NASSCOM for taxation issues, and leads many delegations to the government and ministry on various industry issues. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us today and gracing us and our members with your thoughts and your time. Now, finally, I have the privilege of introducing today's moderator and my very good friend, CA Ganesh Prabhu. He is a person who's based out of Chennai. He is in fact a BCom, Masters in Finance Management, a CA, a Bachelor in Law. He's completed his visa, completed a certification course in indirect taxation, and the list goes on. In fact, he's a very leading professional, I might add, and he regularly represents across various appellate authorities and assessment authorities in the indirect tax verticals. He's also a faculty member, and most people here will be familiar with his face, where he regularly addresses in indirect tax. He's almost the first person we look to whenever we have any interesting topic that needs a deliberation in indirect taxes. And today we thought having him as a moderator would be right, because he knows the issues, whether as a professional or what the industrialists are also facing. So I'm sure he will lead today's session in a very, very nice manner. Thank you so much, Ganesh sir, for accepting our invitation to be here today. With this, we've completed the introduction of the speakers and we're over to the session. We're really looking forward to a very fruitful discussion. Now I request Sunil Gabhawala sir to give his presentation before we proceed to the panel discussions. Over to you, Sunil ji.
Thank you, Abhishek, for a very nice introduction, and it's my pleasure to be at this forum where we have all these senior panelists along with us, and we are talking about an issue relating to e-invoicing, and teething issues in e-invoicing is what we typically say. So let me just start sharing with the presentation. I am unable to share it, it seems. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Is the presentation visible to you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So it's as I was highlighting, it's my pleasure to be talking about certain teething issues which come up in e-invoicing. The structure which we plan to do is I will initially talk about the provisions relating to e-invoicing, how it has panned out, and what are the key objectives of e-invoicing. And thereafter, we would have the industry panel presenting the concerns which they have faced while implementing e-invoicing, and we have an esteemed panel on that front. And thereafter, Ganesh ji will moderate the questions, and each of us as panelists will be available for the questions. So without much ado, let me straight away move into the concept of e-invoicing. And this again is taken from the GSTN site, that what is this e-invoice all about? We already had something known as an e-way bill. Most of the organizations would have a delivery challan or an electronic document which has been created from their systems. There would be a tax invoice which is a GST mandate, and now we are bringing in this concept of e-invoice. So what is that e-invoice? Essentially, this e-invoice is a substitution of the tax invoice, and over the last 3 years, what we have seen is there have been fundamental challenges in terms of matching of transactions and also compliance of the provisions of the GST law. So because of the scattered data and the ambitious project of GSTR 1, 2, 3 not getting implemented at the GSTN portal level, we found that there were challenges both from the industry front, because there were lots of reconciliations which used to happen, and there was lots of challenges from the government front also, because unscrupulous dealers would generate invoices and not pay the taxes and deprive the government of the revenue. I think e-invoice is the way forward in that sense, that the government feels that once an e-invoice is generated, it can automatically get reported onto the GSTN portal, and once it gets reported onto the GSTN portal, you have more accurate data, and reconciliations become much easier. That of course has been an immediate objective vis-a-vis the GSTN, but essentially what GSTN talks about is not merely that as the final advantage. According to the GSTN, the reporting to GST is merely a byproduct, and the reconciliation is merely a byproduct. Essentially what we are looking at is a scenario where if you walk back 10 years, and there would be many participants who would be practicing since quite some time, you would find that every transaction there was a for wherever there was a payment to be done, people used to issue checks. The checks needed to be couriered to the customer or to the supplier. Supplier would then deposit in his bank account. If his bank is in one state and the other person's bank is in another state, there was something known as an outstation clearing and things like that. Now, of course, all of that does exist today, but to a substantial extent, the payment mechanism today is more real-time and electronic in the form of NEFTs and RTGS. Same thing happens in the stock markets, where initially there was a transfer, there was a physical share certificate, a transfer which used to happen, and there were registrar and transfer agents where you need to send that document, and then there was a signature difference, and all of this was creating a lot of difficulty. Today, with the demat scheme being there, buying and selling shares has become very easy. So the objective which e-invoice tries to achieve, and if it really happens that way, is essentially a elimination of that paper trail, elimination of the manual tax invoice documents. And we are saying that if the entire business ecosystem goes into this e-invoice mechanism, it will bring in fundamental efficiencies of real-time reconciliations and absorption of that e-invoice into the ERPs and the accounting systems, and therefore would result into paper elimination. That's a very important objective as per GSTN. It would result in increased internal controls, better capital management, and better relationship between the parties. And of course, when all of this happens, there will be a lot of reduction in the cost. This is what is, I think, the long-term objective which the GSTN is looking forward towards e-invoicing. And this is the manner in which it expects the industry and the consultants to look at e-invoicing. In that sense, e-invoicing just doesn't become one more additional burden under the GST law or additional compliance requirement which has to be tick checked or checkboxed out of that entire compliance requirements. but it might in a way complement the business activities. Because today at the purchasing side, an organization will have thousands of invoices, and I'm aware large organizations even outsource this entire process of processing the purchase documents and then entering them into ERPs, because today the printed document which comes is not machine readable, and therefore it cannot directly walk into the ERP or the system. Now this is, I think, the long-term objective of e-invoice, in which we have to look at this entire process. It will take a few years to stabilize, but this is, I think, the long-term objective which is there in the back of the mind. How do you bring that in terms of compliances? So that's where we have Rule 48, which was introduced long time back. It has been, this e-invoicing has been a project since quite some time, and there are 3 sub rules which have been introduced, which define the core of how this e-invoicing gets implemented. So sub rule 4 says that the invoice shall be prepared by such class of registered persons as may be notified by the government by including such particulars in a particular invoice format INV01 after obtaining an IRN, invoice reference number. Now this is going to be the key, and we'll keep on talking about this phrase over the next 30 minutes. By uploading information contained therein on the CGST electronic portal in such manner and subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be specified in the notification. So this basically becomes the enabling provision, which says that if you are a class of registered persons which has been notified, as of today the notification covers SSEs or taxpayers having aggregate turnover above 500 crores, and we'll go into the specifics of those notifications in a couple of slides. So when we are looking at that, what we are told is, if you are within that class of registered persons, you will have to necessarily prepare an invoice after obtaining this IRN from the common portal. And how do you obtain the IRN? You will obtain the IRN by uploading certain information which is specified by the government, and which comes out in your INV01. And then you have rules 5, sub rule 5, which says every invoice issued by the person to whom sub rule 4 applies in any manner other than the manner specified in the said sub rule shall not be treated as an invoice. So this basically brings the mandate, and which brings the enforceability of that entire provision. What it typically tries to highlight is, if you are liable for e-invoicing, and if you invoice if you raise an invoice in a manner otherwise than in the manner of the e-invoice format, then your invoice itself will be treated as an invalid invoice. Now, what are the consequences of the transaction being treated as an invalid invoice? I think there are 2 important consequences. At a supplier side, necessarily you will face a difficulty, because if you are required to issue an invoice but you have not issued an invoice, then there could be a penalty. There is a general provision of penalty which would become applicable to you, and again that would apply for each instance where you have violated this rule, and therefore there can be a huge multiplier impact at your end. More importantly, at the recipient end, one of the requirements for claiming input tax credit under section 16 is that the recipient should have a valid tax invoice in his possession. Because of rule 48.5, if e-invoicing is applicable to you, then the invoice issued by you in a manner otherwise than by way of an e-invoice is not a valid tax invoice, and therefore there could be a risk that at a future point of time each of your customers can be denied input tax credit if you have not been compliant with this provision. Now this, as you know, in a B2B section, when you look at GST with an 18% to a 28% tax rate, if credits get questioned, it can become a huge complication in terms of the commercial aspect of undertaking the businesses. Therefore, I think as an industry, it's very important that e-invoicing is taken with the utmost priority and seriousness, and organizations become compliant to e-invoicing because of the provisions relating to rules 48.4 and 48.5. And we have rule 48.6, which says provisions of sub rules 1 and 2, which basically require you to make triplicate copies of invoices and also have a signature on that. We are told that those provisions shall not apply to any invoice, because it's going to come from the government portal, and it has to be it's going to be digitally signed by the government portal, and therefore those types of redundant data may no longer be required in case of e-invoicing. So while these are the broad rule relating to e-invoice, we go to the next question to define the class of persons to whom such e-invoicing will be applicable. And here we have a little bit of granularity which comes into this entire process. What the government has tried to do is, it has tried to divide the entire transactions into two broad sets of transactions. One is a B2B transaction and one is a B2C transactions. As far as B2B transactions are concerned, there is a specific notification which has been made applicable from 1st of October 2020, wherein the taxpayers having aggregate turnover above 500 crores other than SEZ units are required to raise invoices which are in the nature of B2B invoices, and those invoices are expected to contain an IRN and a QR code procured from the GSTN portal. So this has already been implemented, and we are told that in a phase-wise manner, this 500 crores will be reduced. We will talk about the timelines in the next slide. While we are talking about this, there is also another notification 71, which of course has been postponed till the end of December. Initially, it was meant to be implemented from 1st of October, but now it has been postponed to the end of December, where we are told that if the taxpayers have aggregate turnover above 500 crores, for the B2C invoices, they will contain a dynamic QR code. Now, this is a different type of a code which comes in, which facilitates an online payment. Now, of course, this has been deferred for the time being, and therefore we may reduce our discussion or emphasis on this point. But if there are any concerns on that, we can take it up. But the point which we are trying to bring here is that organizations will have to look at each transaction, go into the granularity of the transaction, and decide whether they are applicable for e-invoicing, and if yes, whether they fit within the first notification or within the second notification. Because certain transactions will go into the B2B segment, certain transactions will go into the B2C segment, requiring a dynamic QR code as and when implemented. As far as the turnover is concerned and the phase-wise implementation is concerned, as of today, we have already implemented this e-invoicing provisions for B2B having an for entities having an aggregate turnover above 500 crores. Newspaper reports and some informal feedback suggest that we will slowly gradually phase this down, and the timelines are that entities above 100 crores will become liable for e-invoicing from 1st January 2021, whereas all the taxpayers would be under the e-invoicing framework from 1st of April 2021. While these dates have been plotted in this table, please note that the notifications for that are still not out. They will be announced in due course, but these are based on newspaper reports and informal confirmations which we keep on getting from the various stakeholders in this regard. So this is one chart which might be important for us to bear in mind. Now the question is, having said that you are liable for e-invoicing, what are the types of transactions which will be there, and how is the e-invoicing getting applicable to them? So there have been detailed clarifications on this front. We are told that it's not only the invoice but also the debit note and the credit note in the context of B2B, where you will have an IRN and a QR code, and there is a field called document type. The document type will define whether it is invoice, debit note or credit note. But in all these three documents which ultimately flow into your GSTR1, all of them you will have the IRN and the QR code being generated. For export invoices also, we are told that the IRN QR code is mandatory. I am aware that there are certain teething issues on this front because the customs invoice may be a little bit different than the invoice which is being created in the system, and there's also the timing issue which comes in on this, but that we can discuss in the panel discussion as we move forward into that. We are also told that transactions with government, and as we know, government includes the central government, the state government and the local authorities, will also require an IRN and a QR code. So again, all the three variations of documents, invoice, debit note, credit note, for B2G transactions will require an IRN and a QR code. As of now, for B2C transactions other than government transactions, no requirement of issuing any QR code or IRN. But yes, there is this notification which has been right now postponed. The day it becomes applicable, there will be a dynamic QR code, no IRN, for B2C transactions. So this is how I think the granularity of the e-invoicing requirement happens. The moot question is, how do you decide whether you are applicable under e-invoicing or not? I think there are two answers. One is a legal answer and one is a practical answer. The legal answer is the notification talks about a scenario where they have defined aggregate turnover for any preceding year. Now, this was a small change in the language which happened just a couple of days before e-invoicing got implemented. Earlier, it was a little bit open-ended. It said aggregate turnover. I did not talk about which financial year. Now we are told any preceding financial year. So it could be 17-18, it could be 18-19, it could be 19-20. If in any of these 3 years your aggregate turnover has exceeded 500 crores, then you are liable for e-invoicing. Now, what is this aggregate turnover? By now, I think all of us are very clear that aggregate turnover is the global turnover, not only the turnover of a specific GST registration, and it includes various types of valuations of taxable as well as exempted supplies, and of course exports, etc. And it has to be calculated on an all India basis. So that has this definition under the CGST Act continues to apply for the purposes of deciding e-invoicing. And when we look at this aggregate turnover definition, what it implies is it's not only the financial turnover, but also the other adjustments like the branch transfers of goods, branch transfers of services, sale of assets, other things. All of them will become a part of your calculation of aggregate turnover. And essentially what the GSTN has done is they have tried to identify SSEs based on the aggregate turnover as reported in the GST returns, and that applicability is available on this website called einvoice1.gst.gov.in, and therefore that's a practical solution. You can go on that website and check whether e-invoicing has been enabled for you or not. If it has been enabled, naturally you will have to comply. And of course there is this grievance redressal also. For example, if according to the e-invoicing portal it is made applicable to you, but according to you it is not applicable, then you can raise a grievance and get it corrected. Or the other way around also, that assuming your turnover exceeds 500 crores but their summation does not make you eligible for e-invoicing, you can write to them and then they will look into the facts of the case, and then in those cases they will make individual SSEs applicable to e-invoicing or not applicable to e-invoicing. This checking of eligibility is very important, because if you are not eligible for e-invoicing under that provision, then the API accesses and the ability to upload the e-invoicing is not enabled to you, and therefore you will not be able to generate an e-invoice if you are not defined to be eligible on this e-invoice one portal. And therefore you might need to check that, and if there are any concerns on that, you can go through the frequently asked questions on that website and then decide on this aspect, and then maybe even take corrective action as and when required. Now, having said that e-invoicing, whom it is applicable, and then essentially we are saying that an IRN or a QR code has to be generated. Now, how do you go about doing it, and what is essentially the roadmap towards that entire process? And I think again for that purpose, you will find that under the GSTN presentation, they've given a very interesting flow chart of the process flow or the workflow to be implemented in this regard. And as we all know that unlike your GSTR1, which you can do in an offline mode, when it comes to e-invoicing, this has to be happening on a real-time basis. It is very much closer to the client process, and there will be fundamental volumes of this transaction. And therefore, a physical or an offline mode may not really make a lot of sense in this entire scenario, and that's what is understood by the GSTN portal itself. And therefore what they are permitting is what is known as a client API interface. And this is a very interesting flow chart which has been presented, which I can explain you over the next couple of minutes to understand how e-invoicing gets implemented. So at a client level there will be an ERP. In ERP, the data will be generated for preparation of an invoice. Of course, this data will be massaged, it will be checked for accuracy, and then through a extractor, which is basically a software, this data can go. Hello.
Yes, sir. Hello.
Sir, you're audible, sir. You can proceed.
Am I audible?
Sir, you are audible.
Yeah, you can proceed, sir.
Yeah. So through the extractor, which would be a software, the data which is required for the generation of the IRN QR code can flow in.
Yes, audible. Sir, your voice got. Hello.
Sunil ji? Sunil ji?
Sunil ji.
Sunil ji, you're not audible. We cannot hear you now. I'm not sure if you can see us.
Yes, maybe his presentation is over, I think.
Yeah.
Sunil ji.
Selva, can you just call?
Yeah, I'm just trying to give him a call.
Thank you, sir. We apologize, participants. We're just trying to reach out to Sunil ji. There appears to be some technical difficulty. He's having some data issues. He's just trying to rejoin. So we will just give him 2 minutes time. If he's unable to reconnect, then we'll start proceeding. Ganesh ji, we can proceed if sir doesn't rejoin. So we'll give just 2 minutes time.
Yes.
Ganesh, sir, shall we ask the other panelists to maybe share a few words before we proceed to the moderated session, or do you want to straight away go to the?
No, we can. If Sunil, it is getting delayed, then we can ask.
No, I think Sunil ji just joined back. I think he's just joined back. We'll just wait to see if he's coming on screen.
Yeah.
Perfect. Sunil ji, can you speak?
Yeah, am I audible? Is it
Yes,
fine?
sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Give me a second. I will re-share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But your PPT is not visible. Your we can see your
Is it
Explorer
now?
window. Yeah. Now, sir. Now
Yes.
it's okay, sir.
Okay, I think this is, I mean, in the initial part of the discussion, we were talking about teething problems and understanding what could be the teething problems. And I think this is a live demonstration of what could really be a teething. Of course, I'm sure there will be many more teething problems like this, but this is something which would happen, especially when you are looking at scenarios where factories are located in a remote location, and large service companies can have so many activities happening at small branches, where in some places there might even be an electricity connection issue, and that's in those types of scenarios, how are we going to deal with these types of backups? What are the backup plans? That I think is one of the questions which people would have. But as I was explaining, this is the broad process of e-invoicing, the workflow and the document flow which is expected to be done as far as e-invoicing is concerned. Just to put it in a very simple manner, the invoicing ERP or the invoicing software will generate invoice particulars, and the government has of course recommended a schema, published a schema, as Rajendra Kumarji rightly highlighted. That schema, there was a lot of activity and effort undertaken by the ICAI in bringing that invoice schema. And when we look at that schema, you'll find that there are certain mandatory fields and certain optional information. To start with, it's important that at least the mandatory fields which are a part of the invoice schema are clearly available in your ERP. If no, then you will find that there's a business process change which might be required at the industry level to make sure that that data is correctly captured in the ERP, because unless the data is available in the ERP, it may be difficult to send it in a JSON format to the IRP. Now, sending that data after validation to the IRP in a JSON format and obtaining IRN QR code would definitely be a responsibility of an ASP GSP. And once that happens, it comes down again, that IRN or the QR code will have to be printed, and there has been a guidance which has been very clearly mentioning that the QR code has to come on the face of the invoice. It can be small, you will have to find some place where you can put it, but you will have to put it on the invoice, and thereafter only it becomes a valid invoice, and you can print that invoice, or you can even email that invoice, because a physical copy may no longer be required in the future. So this is broadly the e-invoice activity which one will have to look at. Only important point which we need to bear in mind is that once your e-invoicing is generated, there will be a real-time tracking of the invoice with the GST portal. Now, one common problem which we are envisaging, especially in service industries, is the issue of invoice date versus IRN date. And I'm sure many of you would also be aware of this aspect, that many a time when there's a monthly billing to be done, the value of the billing may be dependent on information from clients. For example, if it's a software company, you could be entering into a T&M project wherein the invoice will be based on the number of man hours used in a project in a particular month. Now, that information of payroll and the man hours and the work done might come to you only at the end of the month, and only thereafter you may be able to generate an invoice, and you would want to generate the invoice on the last day, as of the last date of the month. So typically on 2nd of, let's say, November, you might be generating an invoice which is dated 31st of October. Now, as of today, many organizations keep their ERPs open for 3 or 4 days and permit a backdated entry up to a particular date, and then there's a cutoff in terms of the eligibility to raise an invoice under the, and this 3-4 days, 5 days keeps on varying from organization to organization. And for that limited period, a tolerance is there that you can raise a backdated invoice. Now, because of IRN being generated and IRN having the date stamping of the IRN, the question which comes up is, if on the 2nd of November, I am generating an IRN for an invoice which wants to be dated as of 31st of October, the initial question was whether this will be acceptable at all, or whether the IRN, the e-invoicing generating portal will throw it out as an error. So luckily that has been clarified in the FAQs to say that this validation is not there. But at the same time, there will be a trail which will be available, and this trail can sometimes be questioned by the officers, and you might need to explain the reasons for this backdating. So this is one important aspect which the industry which needs to bear in mind. Similarly, where there could be a scenario of a place of supply and a tax type conflict. I am aware most of the ERPs have taken care of these types of scenarios, but if it has not been taken care of, then you might face some difficulties over here while generating the IRN. Of course, when you are generating the e-invoice, you will need to understand the mandatory and the optional fields and the size restrictions, and accordingly, depending on each organization and the industry, you might need to adapt and align your internal processes to be really geared up for this e-invoicing part of this entire thing. When we are talking about all of this, an important aspect which we need to bear in mind is, once an invoice has been uploaded on the GST on the e-invoicing portal, thereafter a cancellation is permissible only within 24 hours. Thereafter, if there is a transaction, it will flow into the GST portal, and you will have to do a manual adjustments on the GSTN portal and amendments on the GSTN portal, for which there is no detailed guidance. Again, there would be a trail which will be available, and therefore our recommendation primarily is that avoid backdated cancellations of invoices. As far as possible, prefer a credit note route. Rather than cancelling an invoice, issue a credit note and upload that credit note also on the GST portal and the IRN portal. Otherwise, there could be some difficulties on that front. The only immediate aspect which we see is that this e-invoicing will result, initially it is expected to remove the reconciliation process, but we are seeing that it will actually add one more layer for reconciliation, because we already have data as per ERP, data as per financials and the GSTN, and within GSTN we are aware of the GSTR1 3B data and internal reconciliations between these data. Now we have one more data point of e-invoicing, and therefore even that will need to get reconciled along with e-way bill, which applies only for the purposes of goods. Make no mistake, the e-way bill continues to exist, and therefore despite the e-invoice, you would be required to raise an e-way bill also. Of course, to some extent that data will be auto-populated in the e-way bill portal, because both e-way bill as well as the IRN is being generated by the NIC portal itself. And this is one more aspect which we need to bear in mind, that e-invoicing is done on the IRN portal, which is the NIC owned portal, whereas the GST returns are filed on the GSTN portal, which is managed by Infosys. So there are two different systems. Though there will be a seamless integration at some point of time, there could be some challenges on this front. So to summarize, what is the way forward for the industry? I think the first point is to check applicability, and I'm sure maybe all of us would have done that till now. It's already 1 month since its implementation. Map the data points and review masters, and if required, undertake or adapt certain business processes as required. And again, you will have to evaluate the IRN generation option. Either your ERP or your accounting software itself can have the ability. If it does not have that ability, then you can do it offline through your in-house IT teams, or you can choose a external vendor who is an ASP GSP and go ahead with an API integration or some element of customization. And when we do all this, also look at the process flow and try to align or realign your reconciliation and your control charts. I think that is how e-invoicing will get implemented for the SSEs. Of course, as we rightly talked about, few SSEs up to 500 crores are already, above 500 crores are already have seen how the e-invoicing has got implemented. For the others, they need to work over this project over the next 1 or 2 months and make sure that they are ready for this entire implementation. So I think that was what was from the legal side as far as e-invoicing is concerned. I would now hand it over back to the organizers for any questions and the further process of the panel discussion. But before that, we can have some pain points and some experiences from the industry perspective, which would be done by one of the industry panelists. Thank you very much for a patient hearing. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sunil ji. Very wonderful presentation that you have given. As rightly said, Ganesh sir, shall we get a few words from the panelists before we proceed to the session? What do you feel, based on your whatever you have expectations in terms of the time?
We will take the panelist views, and then we will get into the more queries.
Sure, sir.
Yes.
Okay, Ganesh. So you can whatever order you prefer to go the moderation, we will take the same way for the speakers to the panelists to maybe speak now.
We'll ask Balasubramanian sir to give his view, because e-invoicing is something very different from the for the service industry, at least from the goods industry's perspective. E-way bill, one set of requirement is already set, and it's a next level upgradation, no doubt about it. It's different, but from the service industry perspective, we want to know the experiences, the way in which it is handled. Yes, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Ganesh. Thanks to the Institute for giving me an opportunity to present my views here. I'll start off by saying that e-invoicing is a wonderful initiative of this government in terms of the digitization initiative which the government has taken up. It's a very award with an award objective of improving the ease of doing business and ease of compliance as well, because as CA Sunil sir mentioned, a lot of reconciliation issues that we were all facing for last two years will come down, while there are other sets of pain points which may come up, but large amount of reconciliation issues will go away once the implementation is done at a little broader level. And so let me quickly come to the software business, the export business that the Indian IT industry is faced with. In my view, the e-invoicing has alleviated a lot of burden for us, because SEZ units have been kept away. Large amount of exports have been kept away, unless you need to get into certain refund and the rebate issues. Otherwise, you don't have to follow the e-invoicing requirements. But if we have to get into a rebate kind of a model, I think the e-invoicing would be a seamless implementation, because it can be linked with the Softex, it can be linked with the EDPMS system of the RBI, and then straight away come into the rebate, which the government had promised, when they implemented GST, that the rebate would be automatically credited. I think we are moving towards that direction, and this is a wonderful step in that direction. And from an Indian IT industry perspective, e-invoicing for indirect taxes is not a new thing. In fact, CA RK sir mentioned in his address that e-invoicing has been there, in a global stage as well. In most of the European countries, if you look at Austria, Germany, Poland, they all have a mechanism called SAFT. It's called the Standard Audit File for Tax, kind of a methodology where you give all your invoicing details, in an electronic format to the government. But India has taken it to a next level, right? The QR code and the IRN system is very, very unique to this country. And to think of that kind of a process and implement it, in such a phased manner in this country is a very, very welcome step. And I think we should congratulate the GSTN, we should congratulate the government, and we should congratulate everybody, including the institute, which has worked with the GSTN in this project, to make it happen. And we as professionals, we owe it to this country, we owe it to this nation to participate and make this a grand success. Of course, there are a lot of teething issues. We'll talk about it as we move forward, Mr. Ganesh. But at this point in time, I just wanted to say these words as opening remarks.
Thank you, Balasubramanian sir. I just now invite Manikandeshwaran sir from the manufacturing industry perspective. For all said and done, when it comes to the number of invoices and its quantum is concerned, always from a manufacturing perspective and specifically from the automobile perspective, it will be huge. Sir, we want to know your initial experiences of this last 1 month in terms of it. Manikandeshwaran sir.
Am I audible?
Yes sir, audible sir.
Yeah. Can I share my presentation?
Yes sir, kindly sir. Your video, you have to switch on your video sir.
No, I switched. My video is switched on.
Are you able to see him, sir? But I can't see him, sir. His name is.
I can see. Can I? No, but okay. I switched on, but I don't know why my video is. Okay, no issue. I will continue with the audio.
Yes sir. Selva.
His name is not on the list. His name is not displaying on the list of the panelist list, sir. It seems his audio is offline.
No, Ganesh would be able to hear my audio, right?
Yes, sir. I'm able to hear your audio, sir.
I can also hear it, sir. only thing is that we can't see your name under the panelist list. So that is the reason your video is also not getting displayed and we can't give you the presenter rights. So it's
No
better
problem. What should I do? What should I do?
One thing, sir, you can rejoin the session, sir, just leaving it. In the meanwhile, sir will take a question to next panelist, Mr. Kishore.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
please.
Okay, sir. We'll wait for Manikandan sir to rejoin. Meanwhile, we'll get back to listen from the automobile sector from Kishore Singh ji. Kishore Singh ji was being joined from Ashok Leyland. Sir, we want to share your experiences on invoicing on its initial steps, sir.
Yeah, thank you for all the panelists and been wonderful presentation we have heard. Hope you could able to hear my audio.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, good. See, yesterday we received a message from the NIC by email to us. They say so far at least 495 lakh invoices, e-invoices has been raised in the NIC portal by the 27,400 taxpayers. That means it has started from that day 1 of the October and gradually get increased. That means on the first day it was 8.4 lakh invoices are raised. On 31st, it has gone up to 35 lakh invoices. That means it shows that substantial numbers are getting generated in the NIC portal. So I would like to share our experience in implementing the e-invoicing in the organization. So we are one among the few large companies made in-house development and opted for application program interface, that's called API, with the government. So to get this, actually we have to done extensive testing in the sandbox environmental. We have done it and we got the direct API. That means we have not taken any service provider like API, the ASP, GSP type of a service provider. We are not availed it. Also, we have conducted the extensive knowledge sharing session. This is more important, knowledge sharing session to the business. How important is the e-invoicing is. That the most important is in the depot side. That means they are all connected in the remote locations. We need to just give them up a type of a knowledge sharing. How this e-invoicing is very critical in an environmental, business environmental. So also we also made a handholding for the supply chain partners like our vendor. Also, we have been done it to our dealers. We have facilitated that in implementing the e-invoicing on that. To start with, we have done a lot of cleaning up of activity in our GSTN master. We have revalidated the GSTN site so that we just see that all the GSTN numbers are revalidated so that no errors have been popping up while we get into e-invoicing scenario. Since we introduced the e-invoicing solution in-house, this has resulted in a considerable amount of learning for us, and we could bring in a lot of in-house control. So that what happened right now, the user cannot take a print without an IRN has been get generated on that. And also we have been barring certain users, we are not allowing them to raise a e-invoicing in that. So these are all certain type of internal controls we have brought in on that. Though we have initial problem by generating export invoices with a zero rated ship to bill to, there are certain type of an initial teething problem we had it, but all these things are ironed out over a period of time. I would like to here endorse the phenomenal support received from NIC and GSTN, providing all the type of clarification details as and when we just call for it from the NIC officers or from the GSTN officer. So we could generate it roughly 1.4 lakh invoices during the first month. Is that we have been one among the top 100 companies. This is the message we got it from the NIC yesterday. So I would like to share a few pain points, or type of a thing like in the sense teething issues. Maybe during the discussion we can take it up. One of the point is like basically the law was amended that the QR code can be carried for movement of goods. Maybe in the handheld device the QR code can be carried without a hard copy of the invoice. However, the notification is avoided in this regard. If this notification is issued, this will facilitate the ease of doing the business on that. So this is the one thing which we have been expecting from the government. And also the TCS was introduced on 1st of October and the income tax. In the invoice level, it is getting captured this TCS. Whether this, how it is going to react in the e-way bill, whether e-way bill should capture the TCS or not. This type of certain technical clarification we were just expecting from the government. So I believe Mr. Sunil also touched upon this, some of these points during this presentation on that. The other one is this dynamic QR code. We have very short time to implement dynamic QR code? How do we just go? Some type of a clarification, some type of a detailed information we are looking for from the government as from the industry perspective on that. So this type of a thing, we have some teething issues. Hopefully, it will be ironed out over a period of time by government providing certain inputs or clarification, which we expect that keep coming on this. And also we have certain type of a technical issue like JSON schemes and other thing, which maybe it's operational issue which I don't wanted to bring in this meeting. But main expectation is for the initial period, even some small procedure lap or bona fide omission in the e-invoicing, the ITC should not be disallowed. Maybe for an initial period, the government should consider this industry request. And then as long as assessee is paid the GST, movement of goods has taken place and reported on the monthly return, the government should take a lenient view for at least 2-3 months so that the industry has got some type of a time to settle down completely on this. And the other one is as the government has also been informed already that e-way bill will be discarded immediately. So for the e-invoicing. So since the e-invoicing details and e-way bill details are one and the same, as far as possible, e-invoicing generated, if you are reported in IRN portal, the government should look into that immediately. The e-way bill should be discontinued on that. This is one of the requests which we are trying to see that. And also any changes in the schema version of the file, the government should allow the industry to know implementation. Some date they should give it. For example, new schema version is introduced. So they should provide us some time to just develop in-house so that we can implement it. So instead of just say schema file is introduced today and tomorrow we will not be able to roll out. So that government also should see either the schema should not be very often get changed, or even if it is changed, then we should be given, industry should be given certain time to implement this schema, the revised schema. These are all the requests from the industry side, which I would like to place it before the institute.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Selva Manikandeshwaran sir has joined.
Join the session, so you can discuss with this panelist, and we'll just try to get it on board.
Okay. So to initiate this panel discussion on e-invoicing, on its teething issue, very first challenge that is being expected is what is the time that is getting involved to generate this IRN is one of the question from the attendees also, and it is just we want to know because some of those organizations use an independent third-party software for generation. It takes a different time. Maybe both of you can share your experience in terms of the time involved approx for generating it. We'll start a basic beginning over here, sir. Yes, sir. Kishore, sir. Yes.
Yeah, see, actually, I would like to frankly discuss over here. See, we could able to see that 95% of the invoices, whenever from the ERP system, it goes to IRP reporting, the data comes immediately. Definitely the 5% of the invoice, what happened, when we just fire it back to the government NIC portal, so we get a blank screen. That means no QR code IRN don't gets reflected immediately on that. So what happened, the user sees that nothing, no data have come back from the NIC, though they refire the invoice once again. What happened in that case, they say it's a duplicate invoice number or duplicate IRN is generated. This error message we keep continuously getting it on that. So we are not very sure whether is it because of the bandwidth problem with ours, within our system, or it's the government system, or it is an integration problem or a bug issue with the system. Because there is a 5% of the issue we are still facing on that. Because always what happened, it comes a blank screen. So once again, when the user refires it for the NIC portal, then it says that duplicate IRN. That means the IRN is already generated. It is not coming back to our ERP system. This problem we are facing it. But if you ask me that it is almost happening in the real time, but few percentage of the invoice we are getting this type of an error now. Maybe I can say 5% of the invoice as of today. This is our experience since we have been doing it in-house development.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. The experience is same. In fact, for us the complexity is slightly larger. Because we have determined tax based on multiple countries, right? Because we have if you are having say 1 lakh invoices in a month, 80,000 invoices are to customers outside India, right? And therefore there are complex logics of applicability of VAT, applicability of sales tax in the US, countries with local taxes, etc. So there are multiple levels of determination which happens at the invoice level. So our experience has been, even with those complexities, 90-95% of the invoices go through smoothly. There are data losses when it is reported back. When there is a call which happens to the IRN portal, when it comes back, it does not come back in almost all all the cases. About 5% of those cases we don't get it back. But if we wait for some time and reload it, it does come back without any issues.
Sunil sir, at the law end,
issue is on the bandwidth side, both from the origin side and from the GSTN side. So if we are talking about country-wide implementation where even the 100 crore guys would come in, we should have a better bandwidth arrangement, as far as the GSTN is concerned. I'm sure GSTN is working on that because they are aware of these issues.
As the number of assessees goes high as expected, from the current number of 2 to 3% that is being told to a sizable number of percentage, then it would have this challenge. Sunil ji, from the expectations on the policy level, there is a serious change from the e-way bill to the e-invoicing. Is this really mandatory, or is this really the need of the hour, was often the question, because having the testing time, all this is, many people ask this question because maybe at a 500 crore plus organization level, the situation is different. But at a 100 crore plus organization level, where we have the date is very near, which is about to get implemented, at least the recent report says from 1st January 2021. The kind of technology investment, all this, isn't this time, is it really needed, or it can still go with in the old modalities?
I think it's a very valid question which you are raising, Ganesh, and the way things are, I think over the last couple of years, without sounding critical, we find that there is a little bit of a confusion in terms of policy making, in terms of the actual implementation. So essentially, if you looked at this 100 crore thing, this 100 crore thing was talked about in the last October 2019, and then slowly and steadily we kept on postponing it for various reasons. And as the consultant, what we have experienced is we did talk a lot about this to many of our clients in that range of 100 to 500 crores. And there was really no clarity on the actual date of implementation. And unlike 2017, where the things were very different, and we were looking at a wholesale GST implementation, when in 2019-20 we are looking at e-invoicing, the budgets available with organizations for technology spends are very limited. And with the current crisis being there could be further strain on those budgets. The second aspect is we are looking at e-invoicing to be a real-time process, because it cannot work in any way other than a real-time process. And a typical understanding of an ERP, it is a very dynamic type of a thing, and there are so many internal dependencies, and trying to tweak it slightly and in a piecemeal manner sometimes might lead to a lot of unexpected consequences and difficulties on that front. So I would believe that yes, there is some case to say that we should go a bit slow. Maybe it's not the right time to really 500 crore plus is a different ball game altogether. 100 crores is still manageable, but then the next one is really worrisome, wherein we are saying that by April everyone would be under the e-invoicing net. That I would feel is really, really ambitious. And I would believe that even the 100 crores can go a bit slow.
Sir, to be more frank with you, even one of the eminent ports of Tamil Nadu is still finding it difficult to alter its ERP and generate the IRN for some of the invoices which was raised 30 days before, as just they are about to cross their due dates. Now, in case if it is not generated, what are the challenges that we have from the GST law end for various reasons.
And as you rightly pointed out, Ganesh, these are actual problems which do arise. And I can understand these issues because when you look at especially MNCs, so when you're looking at ports or many entities like that, many of them might be multinationals or again government sponsored organizations. And in all those cases, if you have a homegrown software or you are dependent on an international software which is a native type of an ERP and which is not your standard SAP or an ERP, and in many of these organizations your ERP might be a standardized ERP like an SAP or Oracle, but you would have invoicing which would be done in a very different type of a homegrown software. Now in those types of situations, those homegrown invoicing softwares will need amendments, and those amendments cannot be done by at the Indian end because they might have global ramifications, and therefore they have to be done by the headquartered IT teams, which might be in some third country, and those jurisdictions may not immediately ties to the requirements of the Indian e-invoicing requirements, and there will be a process lag, time lag, and these are all genuine issues which would really come up. Now, of course, as I told you, if you really look at a strict way of Rule 48, as I was highlighting in my presentation, there is a non-compliance at the end of the port in terms of non-generation of a correct invoice, and consequentially, if that invoice was to be generated in a correct manner and there is a non-generation of a proper invoice, there could be a doubt or clouds being set on the claim of the credit by the recipient. Now, if that happens, it's going to be a big issue. I am aware that many organizations have started obtaining declarations from the suppliers or the vendors, seeking a declaration that either they are issuing a even a QR code compliant invoice, or if they are not issuing that, they are not liable to issue. And they would want an indemnity also to say that if at any future point of time the credits are denied, then the amounts will be reimbursed by the vendor. So all those issues will start coming in, and I think earlier the better is the scenario, which especially if you are above 500 crores, definitely I think it's time that that compliances start kicking in.
Balasubramanian sir, my question is from the software industry, as Sunil ji has already raised, there might be a time delay in preparation of invoices and filing of it. I'll take up the law related question from Sunil ji, but about 1 or 2 days, preferably a cost plus model of billing when it is being planned for the client or whatever be it. If in case there is a possibility of these delay, how or what is the thought process that has been goes in towards, is there any change in the billing pattern has been planned, or can you elaborate us on that, on the billing patterns?
Yeah, so I'll speak from Wipro perspective, and from a large, because this is applicable to 500 crore plus, and therefore most of us would follow a similar pattern. And what happens in T&M invoices is we take a cutoff date for invoices, right? And typically that date is around the 23rd or the 24th of the month, and the efforts taken up to that date is billed, and we may extend the billing date for a couple of days for certain large customers where the approvals have to be received, like Sunilji rightly mentioned. In fact, we don't even send them an invoice, right? Because we have to log in our efforts in their invoicing portal, in the customer's invoicing portal, and the customer's technical manager will approve the invoice, and then we account it in our books, and they will make the payment just based on the logging in that we have done in their invoicing portal, right? We don't even send them an invoice. They are supposed to pay us based on our input in their in their system, and the invoice that we generate is only for record purposes, that we retain that we have received so and so money, and this is the proof of that. So since we are going to close the billing around the 23rd or 24th, maybe 25th or 26th in most cases, depending on the Saturday, Sunday, we don't see a big issue from a T&M being done. But where we see issue is where there is a captive unit. We also have a lot of subsidiaries outside India. Or if there is a captive subsidiary in India which bills on a cost plus on a monthly basis, they may not follow this cycle of 23rd or 24th. They may only do after they close the accounts, right? So they will invoice, say for the month of October, they will raise the invoice in November because that is based on the costs that are incurred in the month of October. So there will be a mismatch between the period. We will have to see how this particular thing settles down. My personal view is it is an invoice of November, though it is for the services rendered in October, because the approval, so if the agreement, the transfer pricing agreements are worded correctly, we can say that it is due in November, and therefore it is an invoice of November. Is the way we can look at it. But we can hear from Sunil ji as to what is the right way to position where the invoice is raised in a subsequent month for the efforts rendered in an earlier month. Typically, in a case where we invoice our own subsidiaries, or the subsidiary invoices the parent in a captive unit scenario. But that's a very genuine issue that we are facing. But large amount of external customer invoices, since we take a cutoff date which is much earlier than the end of the month, we don't have a problem, because mind you, we close accounts by the 5th, and we report, TCS reports their quarterly financials by the 10th. We report by the 11th or the 12th. So our invoices are all closed well before the 30th.
Sunil ji, on this invoicing related aspects, our question here is, in case of captive units, or in case of all those places where the cutoff is going to be exactly end of that month, and 1 or 2 days later it is a backdated billed by the end of the period. However, the IRN in the portal is generated subsequently. At a later point in time, the issues in terms of time of supply on all those grounds, how it is going to be there, or it has to be streamlined.
So these are challenges which will very much be there, and what Bala pointed out, in terms of captive units, perhaps what happens is in case of long-term contracts where you are servicing the client for a period exceeding 3 months, one can look at the situation a bit differently, because there is a separate time of supply for continuous supply of services. But and maybe we can take a view that if the transfer pricing agreement or the contracts are worded appropriately, one might be able to say that my time of supply itself happens on the 4th of November or the 5th of November. And I think that's a good workaround in these types of scenarios. But I'm worried about scenarios where the services are not in the nature of continuous supply of services. And you can have many examples where there can be a one-off rendition of service. And there might be, it may not exactly be an example like a T&M model, but there could be many, short-term projects or, simplistic types of supplies of services. And those services, preparing all these invoices within that strict time frame can be a bit difficult. My suggestion on the policy front to the government would be that for October, they have relaxed this condition and given a 1 month time frame. I think somewhere is a statutory process, maybe not 30 days, but 10 days or 15 days bandwidth should be incorporated in the provisions itself for a long-term basis. And perhaps that would resolve most of the issues which might come in, because it would be really too ambitious to say that everyone would be able to do a real-time upload. There can be bandwidth issues. We are not even talking, see the profile today which we have is of panelists who are into organized large value transactions. We are not even talking about entities like telephone companies, right? Where the biggest challenge would be they would be generating million invoices on the particular cutoff date. And of that million invoices, maybe 500,000 would be B2B, 500,000 would be B2C. They are still grappling with that B2B itself, because there will be one Ganesh Prabhu who would have given his GST number to the Vodafones or the Airtels of the world, and somewhere they have lost it in their system, and Ganesh Prabhu is anyways even today fighting his head with those entities ki mera GST number, why is it not appearing in my B2B despite 3 years over. And the only way these types of organizations can identify or classify between B2B and B2C is through their invoicing systems. There's no other way they can go into a micro level detail ki, okay, initially somebody gave a B2C, now suddenly he has come back and said that, look, my GST number is available, so please push it into B2B. All of those challenges are going to be there in those types of entities also.
My next question to you, Sunilji, on two grounds. One, is there a time frame we have, as we discussed, for the cancellation of invoice, and is there a partial cancellation of the invoice, taking away lightly from the organized industry, getting into the others? Do we have this aspects? Yes.
So typically when you look at e-invoicing can only prescribe the manner of generation of the invoice. It cannot prescribe the legal connotations of or the liabilities towards GST. Therefore, if you have raised an invoice, of course, the guidance suggests that up to 24 hours, the data will be available on the IRN portal, and therefore up to 24 hours, they allow you modifications and cancellations. Beyond that, that is not permitted. Now, while we are talking about this 24-hour period, it's a running period, and therefore it has no relevance at all. It's as good as saying that it is not available. Considering that factor, what would happen is you would ultimately be allowed to make changes on the GST portal, because all this data will as a proposed transaction when you are going to file your GSTR1. At that point of time, you would have an authority and an ability to amend or modify or cancel those transactions. When you do that, naturally there's a substantial audit trail which becomes available to the tax authorities, and therefore one will have to use discretion of whether we want to really do that and open up a reconciliation exercise 2 years down the line where nobody is able to explain it, or whether we really want to avoid cancellations and modifications altogether and support that transaction or that amendment through a credit note route, issue a credit note and pass that credit note also through the IRN portal. So therefore it's a clean and a documented process, and large organizations would always want that type of documentation, because typically organizations have a lot of attrition, and when assessments and adjudications happen, the person who had uploaded or generated the transaction may no longer be there in that organization. So it's always better to have a scenario of a credit note rather than going in for ad hoc cancellations and modifications, and that has been our strong advice to all our clients in this modified, in this type of an e-invoicing framework.
Balasa, you want to add anything with
no,
regard
so
to this?
the point, I think I agree with Sunilji on all the things that he mentioned. I think the credit note is the clean way of cancelling. If you are not able to do it within 24 hours, I don't advocate doing anything even within the 24-hour window, because then the audit trail is gone. In a large organization like us, we should not keep creating some invoice and cancelling it. We should not expose ourselves to that. A credit note will be a good way of doing it, but we should also have sufficient backup document to the credit note to say that these are credit notes which are cancelled but not sent to the customer, because finally the original invoice also did not go, therefore the credit note also will not go, because we also have a reconciliation process with the customer in terms of what is received, what is not received, what is applied. The receipts are applied against the invoice. So we should be careful enough to square off these credit notes as having not been sent to the customer. So there are what we have done is we have opened a different transaction key to do it, so that when we have to do the reconciliation, these things will get isolated in a different ledger, so that we don't get get these transactions exposed to the accounts receivable team of the customer. So there are ways and means of doing it. The ERP system allows you to do it. I think the credit note is a better thing to do.
Yes. Sir, again, a question to you is, in terms of the export related invoices or all these transactions, a query that has been raised by one of the attendees is whether a foreign currency need to be mentioned, or it is, if in case it is going to be an export invoice, is it need to be mentioned in foreign currency or INR? Yes, sir.
So foreign currency needs to be mentioned, and the export invoices do permit the foreign currency to be mentioned. But there is a problem where, even for certain domestic invoices, we may invoice in foreign currency, right? Because we are allowed to invoice in foreign currency to another SEZ unit or another STPA unit or another EOU unit. That's permissible under the regulations, the FTPs. So that is not permitted because there the option of a foreign currency is not enabled. I think we are working with the GSTN to enable that, because that's a key thing which is missing at this point in time, because we will have difference between the foreign currency and the INR on the date of the invoice versus the day we are looking at it. So we may not be able to convert it into INR and give it at the time of IRN generation, because there will be a problem. So that is the issue that I am perceiving from a software industry point of view. But for the export invoices, foreign currency option is available.
Yes. Sir, when it comes to your auto population of data, have you vouched the auto population of data? Because we have the attendees are little curious to know 1, 2, 3 days is this auto population is happening on a real-time basis, because one of the promises is the data would get automatically pulled in GSTR1. Any views on this? Anything you can share?
We are just in we've just completed 30 days, right? And we are yet to see that. We have not yet tested it. We'll see how it goes. See, we have seen this auto population in the direct taxes when the form 16, the 16As and the 26As, how it worked, right? There were a lot of teething issues to start with, but look at where we are today on the 26As and the form 16. It has worked wonderfully well. So I have no doubts that this auto population would work, but my concern is on the ITC that you will have to take, right? If there is no IRN properly generated, you would be at a disadvantage of not being able to claim the input tax credit. While this would get eliminated over a period of time, I think for first few months, few quarters, we will have this issue of input tax credit being denied because the e-invoicing did not work properly. I think the industry must be prepared to take some hit there, including some administrative aspects of reconciliation. But the large concern will be on how you are able to take the ITC, not on GSTR1, because GSTR1 you can always like what Sunilji mentioned, you can always go and amend, have a solid audit trail to explain this is my GSTR1, right? But on the input tax credit, if it is going to be auto-populated and you are handicapped from taking anything where the IRN is not generated, then we have a real problem of cost on our hand, because that's real money that you would be losing on the table.
Kishore,
you work with your vendors very seamlessly to ensure that this not only you should be well versed with the e-invoicing, your vendors also should be well versed with the e-invoicing, so that your ITC is protected.
Because we have again the few attendees has raised the question how I would be able to know whether my vendor e-invoicing is applicable or not. So that is I think it's a valid.
We have sent out communication to them saying what is applicable, what is not applicable, whether you're covered, not covered, indemnity, all that we have put in a 2-pager and said shared it with our members. In fact, I would request the institute if they can share this best practice with the institute members. We can provide that template also. There are other templates available from other large companies as well that can be shared with the members for their benefit as well.
Kishore Raj Singh ji.
Yeah. I definitely agree with Bala, because we have not seen so far how the auto population is taking place, in our, GSTR 2A, 2B. It's not very clear whether is it going to come with the IRN acknowledgement number, or is it simply going to come with type of, previously how it was reported. Is it a similar way it's going to come? We need to just experience it from the industry side. But from the statutory point of view, also the government should keep a deadline of something like 5th or 6th, whatever the invoice generated in the previous month should be reported in the IRN portal. At least what happened on 10th when somebody files a GSTR1, the data gets populated to us with the IRN numbers. So for the initial period, definitely government should, or institute should also try to push it out to give some type of a relaxation, because it is a teething problem. Possibly, it is, if it is a small error in an invoice, or even the GST amount is paid, goods are moved. This is the thing I was just pointing out. So in the initial period, government should give us some type of relaxation, so that input credit should not be disallowed. So as long as the taxes are paid and the goods are moved and its type of returns are filed, so they should give us a type of small errors in the invoice should not be disallowed with an input credit for the buyer. This is our view on this. But only thing is, a statutory point of view, something like a cutoff date of 5th or 6th, all the invoices generated in the previous month should be uploaded in the portal, will definitely facilitate us in getting the input credit completely on this.
One of the question raised by the attendee here is a bulk upload of invoices has been enabled? Is it possible to do a bulk uploading? Yes, sir.
Yeah. Bulk uploading as such, we are not able to do that. In fact, when we are trying to do it with 150 invoices at a time, we are getting multiple errors. But so we have been telling the user to restrict their invoices to 25 numbers or type of a thing. But it is taking considerably large time. For example, we generated 1.4 lakh invoices last month. And obviously, the users would like to see that at a time 500 invoice or 1000 invoice, they would like to upload it. But in many occasions, what happened if they wanted to do it with even 100, 150 invoices, the errors are throwing out. So bulk upload is not really working as of today, fine. But if it is going to be 20, 25 or 30 numbers, it's really working very well as of now. Maybe as so far we have been discussing this bandwidth or whatever, maybe the technical issues, it need to be ironed out from the both the side.
Yes, sir. Balasubramanian, sir, your view on this bulk upload?
So bulk upload, so far has worked okay. While there have been issues in some, batches that we have had, but we have not, because we are not using the homegrown one like what Kishore ji is using. We are using the standard ERP SAP system, and there is a delay, but it works. But in some batches we do have problems like what I mentioned earlier. It has worked so far well for us.
Okay. So getting into yet another issue. This is something very basic. I do agree, but one of the attendees has raised is that for a ISD or a RCM self-invoicing, do we need to follow the IRN route in case if the organization turnover is going to be more than 500 crores? Your views, sir. Bala, sir. Kishore, sir, if you are there, you can also.
Yeah, as of today, the government has clarified for the ISD and RCM. They said IRN is not required. It is not required to be reported. So based on this FAQs and the clarification, we are just not doing this one with the IRP reporting, not doing it as of today.
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you, sir. So, Sunil ji, I request you to clarify us on two aspects to show us a better light on this dynamic QR code. Because as far as dynamic QR code is concerned, B2C, it is going to be mandatory. And a lot has been spoken. GST lottery was based on this dynamic QR code. All this was being thought about it. And now, for various reasons, it has been taken a backseat for few reasons also we could able to understand. But that was being said as the real need of it to curb the tax evasion in terms of B2C customers. Can you throw some light on that aspects of B2C QR codes.
So essentially, if you look at the dynamic QR code, the objective was that the data will not be sent to the government portal. The entity itself would be expected to generate a dynamic QR code based on the data which is there in the particular underlying transaction, and that dynamic QR code will be printed, and it will permit any end consumer to scan that dynamic QR code using a mobile device, and if there's a direct linkage with the UPI, then the payments can be automatically seamlessly transferred. So essentially, it is a case where the government objective, honestly, would be to facilitate online payments. I would believe that GST is not the right place to do that. And when we try to, with due respect, GST is a law which is expected to collect taxes, and it should not step into so-called other objectives and unnecessarily mess around with so many other things. And rightly so, it has been postponed, according to me. Because at this point of time, consider a case of a retail outlet. It will have hundreds and thousands of stores or locations across the country. Each of the places, we are now not even talking about ERPs or invoicing softwares. We are going to the last mile or the last leg, where in many cases there is just a POS machine. Now, in that POS machine, to enable the QR code is going to be a Herculean task. There are so many transactions where, because the values are so small, people do not generate an invoice.
Understood.
And in those types of scenarios, of course, it's not, I'm not saying that it is an unaccounted transaction, but many a times, and I am aware that many government organizations don't generate invoices.
Yes.
Like, for example, you refer to port trusts.
Yes.
Right. Most of the ports permit an entry into the port trust by paying 10 rupees or 15 rupees. And
Correct.
this is treated as a taxable service on which
Correct.
there is a GST paid by them. I am aware
Yes.
that in most of the ports, this is through a manual, what you can say, token.
Correct.
And there's a perforated sheet of a book wherein there are perforated manual tokens, and there's a cashier who will just give you one token and take 15 rupees from you and allow you an entry inside the port area. How are they going to put a QR code, dynamic QR code on that?
Understood.
So there are multiple challenges, and I think somewhere, even if we want to bring a dynamic QR code, at least some materiality cutoff will have to be put. We can't really go to the last leg and say that even if there's a transaction of 20 rupees or 50 rupees or 100 rupees, we are expecting that entity to generate an e-invoice or a QR code, dynamic QR code related invoice and things like that. It is just too ambitious a project, according to me.
A question from the attendee. In case of a cooperative society which is engaged in construction business of 1,000 crores plus, 90% of its construction activity comes from government. They do government projects. Are they need to generate e-invoice is the question. Are there any exceptions for this cooperative society?
I don't think so. I think it's clearly applicable. I don't think there's any exception. The moment your aggregate turnover exceeds 500 crores, the cooperative society will be liable for e-invoicing. And B2G is very specifically included in the concept of e-invoicing. So I don't think there is any exception for that. Unless the attendee is aware of.
Ganesh sir, Manikandeswaran sir has joined through mobile. You can ask anything.
Okay.
This video might not be visible, but audio.
Yeah. Manikandeswaran sir, welcome. Sir, your thoughts on the implement? Yes, sir. Manikandeswaran sir, you're audible.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible. Sir, your thoughts on the
technical.
Yes, sir, understandable, sir. Sir, we are used to GST. Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, we are used to GST and we understand the technical
glitch.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Not at all. In fact, I wanted to tell the positive side of it, but unfortunately, I was held up.
Yes, sir.
So
Tell me,
I have few slides. So since I could not share, I will. Through audio, I can share it. So
yes,
in fact, it is a very good initiative from our central government through technology platform for the tax reforms. So the e-invoicing is one more milestone in the implementation of the tax form. In fact, in TVS Motor Company, the implementation journey started during end 2019 with our own internal IT resources. We have full stretched IT resources with us. So we are in SAP platform. So through direct API, we have implemented e-invoicing. And early 2020, our IT resources involved all the users for business process mapping and testing. And we have frequently connected with the e-invoicing team involving for API interface testing, establishment of sandbox server, etc. And we would like to record our thanks and gratitude for the continuous support extended by our e-invoice team, particularly Mr. Vikas and Mr. Karthik from NIC. So they have been continuously with us, and with their help, we have successfully gone into live from 1st October 2020. Can I continue?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Kindly, sir. Kindly.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Sir, kindly.
Yeah. So,
yes, yes.
So very happy to announce some highlights. In the month of October 2020, about 1 lakh IRNs have generated by us, and SAP invoicing module to IRP and back with the IRN and QR code instantaneously generated. There were no delay in the process. Auto generation of e-way bill is also facilitated for us. So we have implemented e-invoicing for all our GSTNs. So if time permits, I have few concerns which I can share. Anyway, already I joined delay, so I need your clearance.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Nothing, sir. We have been just initially basically discussing the various aspects of it, the reporting related matters and the challenges that are associated with it. In case from to you a very specific question, sir, is there a workaround to generate IRN on batch processing basis, which once again earlierly it was taken up by Bala, sir. Again, your batch processing experience, because this question is getting repeated again and again by various attendees in terms of the batch processing. Manikandeshwaran, sir.
Yeah, we have yes. We have our workaround. We have implemented batch processing after invoice generation from SAP module. We have uploaded the entire SAP invoice into the IRP, and instantaneously we are getting IR number for all of the invoices generated in SAP. Having said so, we also have a manual uploading process also. In case if any disturbance is there, then we can use that manual process also for few of our GSTNs.
Okay. Sunil, sir, a query to you more specifically in terms of this policy matter on once e-invoicing becomes mandatory, e-way bill is maybe freed. The organization who generate e-invoice will not be mandated to generate e-way bill. The question that comes up from the attendees are when can we expect that? Your views on this, sir?
It's again, it's a policy call which will have to be taken. I don't think it will be any time in the near future. For a simple reason that there are transactions which are not governed by e-invoice but involve movement of goods.
Okay.
Like for example, if there are intrastate movements of goods, there is no requirement to generate a tax invoice because there is no supply. However, an e-way bill is required in most of the states. So therefore, someone will have to really go into all these aspects before one can really say that e-way bills get eliminated, because both are distinct subsets. The e-way bill is tracking movements whereas e-invoice is tracking supplies. There's a difference between conceptual difference between. We talked about a construction company. They might be moving equipment from one state to another, or even if at the project location or at the site. It will not be treated as a supply, and therefore there will not be any tax invoice, but there will be an e-way bill.
Understood. So
let's
we
not
have to-
raise false hopes. Let's hope for the best, but I'm not really very hopeful that in the near future e-way bills will go away.
Yes. So connected point with more specifically to Manikandeshwaran sir and Kishore Singh sir. One of the yet another requirement is once data gets into the system, the part A of the e-way bill will be auto-filled. Was one of the places where it was being told your experiences on e-way bill after IRN. Manikandeshwaran sir or Kishore Singh sir.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, Manikandeshwaran sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So after generation of IRN, the automatic uploading or automatic portray of party of e-way bill is on the simultaneous process. We are not facing any issue. The only concern what we are particularly looking at as a industry practice. See, generally the vehicles, the vehicles will be loaded on a truck, and then only we will generate the invoice, because we have to allocate the shipment, and then invoice will be generated. So unfortunately, post generation of invoice and IRN, when we trying to generate e-way bill, that time the e-way bill portal blocks for those GST which is blocked on account of non-submission of return. So it is a practical issue. Then we have to unload the vehicle. We have to find out the next transporter. See, once even for a small correction, there is no facility for modification of e-invoice. We have to completely cancel the invoice. We have to redo the complete process. That too during the peak season. In such cases, we are encountering a lot of issues. What our IT team is requesting that if there can be an API through which we can our SAP portal can interact with that API. So before we allocate the vehicle, it will go and check in the API whether this particular transporter is valid or blocked. So then at the time of vehicle allocation itself, we can identify the blocking and we will allocate to the appropriate transporter. So post allocation, no such delay will happen. This is one of the requirement we are expecting.
Okay. Kishore Singh sir, anything to add?
See, as such, part A is getting generated without much of a concern. But only thing is, wherein there is a pin code errors, we have been getting it in some occasion, particularly this type of a states like Haryana, Delhi, Telangana, AP, UP, Uttarakhand. These states, there are some type of a pin code errors keep repeatedly coming in. So we are finding it slightly difficult in that type of a situations. Otherwise, it is working seamlessly when the IRN is generated. Part A of the e-way bill is also getting generated on that. But only when we have been trying to put in some pin code, there is type of errors are popping in certain states and certain pin codes only. Because it is distance or erroneously getting calculated, or we need to do manual certain entries, or sometimes it captures 1 kilometer within the same location. Maybe it must be 100 kilometer, but it says at 1 kilometer. This type of operational errors are happening, but hopefully this pin code errors, once they give a direct interface with the pin code, like one pin to other pin, automatically it is get mapped, it will get resolved. But as such, it works seamlessly now for majority of the shipments.
To supplement Mr. Kishore's views, even for exports, our air consignment in Chennai, the pin code errors are frequently encountered.
Okay. So any which need to be corrected.
Yes.
And
at times we are facing one particular problem. Earlier it was very rarely occurred. Now we could face very frequently is the duplicate IRNs. See, the response from IRP to back to our SAP, there were some delays. So since we could not get the IRN, we are again push that particular invoice to the IRP, where it is throw up a message that no, it is a duplicate IRN. So then we have to download the data, because as of now we don't have any cross reconciliation. We have to download the data, identify the IRN number for that particular invoice, and then we are generating the further process.
to all the three panelists here on from the industry, one of the question is, I'm sure all of us are aware from the recent implementation of TDS under income tax. Now, because of that, what are all the challenges in terms of the invoicing? I do understand there are different school of thoughts in terms of it. I'm not a subject matter expert on its implementation also, but for I know there is a TDS introduced on in income tax if in case they are going to interact with goods. Maybe from a service perspective, that would not have a great pinch point, but Balasubramanian sir and Kishore Singh sir can explain the challenge on it in terms of the TDS, income tax TDS on the invoice level.
So the point I think is also on the TCS side, right? Because there is
Not
TCS which
TDS,
is implemented on the goods.
Sorry, TCS, not TDS. Sorry, TCS. Sorry.
So the value of the TCS, there is a mismatch as to whether while it is clarified that it will whether the GST will apply or not, but when we have to put it into the the e-invoicing portal and generate it, there is no specific place to show this TCS, and that is a problem that we are encountering, especially on the goods side. We also have on the services side TDS, but then that does not have any impact on the GST side.
It is TCS.
On the value side, there is a problem of where to mention the invoice. If Sunil ji can give some clarity, I think that will be very useful for a lot of the industry as such.
As of today, this TCS is getting, being reported in others column of the, invoice, wherein you get the total sum in an invoice. But only thing is, while generating an e-way bill, whether this TCS amount to be included or not to be included, this is one question still need to be clarified. And if it is not included, then there is a difference between the supply invoice and the e-way bill. Maybe chances of that it gets held up in the end route. It must be possible one. And the second one is also we are not still clear because we are not seeing the GSTR 2A what is getting auto-populated. Is it going to come with the TCS or without TCS? As a GST, do we need to do this also a reconciliation or missing or mismatch? Do we need to do this step for additional reconciliation? We need to do it. This also need a type of a further clarification. Maybe we can hear it from Sunil on this.
So just to respond to that issue, when you look at the law, Ganesh, law is very clear that TCS and GST are independent levies by themselves. TCS is actually an interim thing, and therefore GST is not applicable on the TCS amount. That I think there nobody over here has a doubt on that process. However, when it comes to putting that data in the invoice, there has been no column which has been prescribed in the e-invoice format, and that's where I think NIC has given a clarification in one of the FAQs to say that it should be put in the other non-taxable column, and that's how most of the industry people have implemented it. The question which was raised was very valid, that how do I populate this in my e-way bill? My advice would be that your e-way bill should be an exact replica of your e-invoice, because please understand, your e-way bill interception is going to happen at a very remote location, and it would be happening at the lowest rung of the hierarchy in the tax officers. Therefore, explaining at that point of time these reconciliations and all is going to be very difficult in case of interception, and we are all aware of the abuses which happen when e-way bill interceptions happen. So my advice is always, whatever is in your e-invoice, please put it verbatim in your e-way bills. That is how one would look at it. And in the interim, I am aware that NIC is developing some patch for this. Till the time that happens, I think other charges, non-taxable, is the place where this will have to appear.
Yet another question from the attendee, Sunil sir, to you specifically. How legally it is correct to advise a client in terms of credit note route just to overcome or resolve the reconciliation route? I understand, but again, this is the specific question that is being raised by Vishwanathan K. Yes, sir.
Sure. So if you go to section 34, which talks about the credit notes, one of the eventualities of a credit note is non-provision of a service or non-supply of non-existence of a supply. Clearly, when you have raised an invoice but you have not, and that invoice is in error, naturally you have not supplied that transaction, and therefore a credit note perfectly would be in order. I do not see any challenge on that front. Of course, as rightly pointed out by Balaji in his initial caveats, one has to be careful that the credit note contains proper documentation explaining why it has been cancelled, and maybe if possible a subsequent reference to a transaction of a fresh invoice being raised, the corrected invoice. So if there's a proper trail, I do not see any challenge from a legal perspective.
Yes, sir. Bala sir, a specific query to you from the attendees. Whether e-invoice will see its journey from local India to global and uniform standard invoice, which can be used for blockchain, since we talk of machine learning all these languages. Will that be possible?
Yeah, it's a very ambitious thing that we are looking at, linking into blockchain. In fact, our vision from the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, as communicated to us in various meetings, is to enable some kind of a technology where the settlement of the payments, like what we have for the stock exchanges, will also happen, so that a lot of these the invoice collections that we have can be made seamless. But then that's a very, very long way to go, right? And I don't think that is so. It could be started as an option for certain group, if they want to enroll into that, but then that will restrict the procurement that you will have to do from the vendors, because the vendors also should come on the same platform, to be able to get into that blockchain kind of a model. So it is possible, but I don't see that coming in the next few years. We'll have to get through the teething issues that we have in terms of the the data getting populated properly, auto population into our GSTR, and how the the reconciliations etc. would work. We will certainly set our foot on the blockchain and the settlement of the invoices one day, but not immediately. As far as the global thing is concerned, I think India is way ahead in terms of, as I explained, in terms of how we have taken the e-invoicing. No other country has thought through this kind of a process. While Europe has what I called as the SAFT process, that is more for the audit of the VAT department, to enable the VAT department to audit the file, not like what we have implemented in terms of real-time invoice generation, where there is a QR code, there is if you scan the QR code, multiple data would show up. So this is like much advanced version of e-invoicing that we're talking about. So if you want a blockchain on a global basis, I don't think it is going to happen anytime soon. But at the India level, it is possible, but it will take some time.
Before we wind up and give it the proceedings back to the secretary, your last words on the invoice.
Ganesh, I have only one point. I think you raised a question on RCM and the ISD. I couldn't answer that. But the point that I wanted to supplement is, while you don't have to do the e-invoicing, but for the purpose of computing 500 crores, you still have to take the ISD invoices and the RCM into account to compute whether you have crossed 500 crores or not. I think Sunil ji covered it, but I just wanted to clarify that to you, Mr. Ganesh, because that's a very key item. If you cross the threshold because of that, you may have to, you will get into the e-invoicing application.
Yes, aggregate turnover effect has to be before I hand over the proceedings. Your last few words, I want to just as a closing remark, Bala sir, on the e-invoicing way forward.
I have said enough. I have said enough on the e-invoicing, on the the objective. The objective is a very award objective. I think we will have a lot of teething issues like what we had in when the GST was implemented itself. We have seen a lot of transition. Like in this panel, there are people who have seen from sales tax to VAT, to service tax to GST. I'm a new entrant here, but I am very confident that this e-invoicing will be successful. We will all make it very successful. But the government, has also listened. I think the way they have postponed from April to now, and also in a staged manner, how they will take every SSE in this country to e-invoicing. We'll have to see how that pans out. But up to that 100 crore level, I am very confident that it will happen very seamlessly, and we will see a new paradigm shift in terms of the ease of compliance, because we are all concerned about when we hear frauds on GST, how the ITC is being misused, etc. Because industry is painted with a brush, saying that we are all misusing the GST system. I think this kind of a system would kind of take away some of those noises around the business community here and help us focus on national business.
Manikandeshwaran sir, your views.
Yeah, see, the problem, as he rightly said by Mr. Bala, at the time of implementation of GST, we have encountered a lot of issues because it is altogether a complete transformation of existing VAT system, existing tax system to new system. And after 3 years of experience, there are a lot of streamlining, there are a lot of improvements we have done, and still long more year to go because the delay happened in filing annual return. So the learning cannot be horizontally deployed because just before over of the first year return, the next financial years have already completed. So we are we are in the pipeline of closing the further financial year. So at some point in time, we have to recollect all our experience and we have to put it for a necessary improvement system. Definitely, it will reduce a lot of work. It will ensure much more compliance and not to more than to government, but also as a client. All fraudulent system, because hitherto there is no such mechanism whether whatever we are paying tax, the supplier or whoever the person who received the money by showing the tax amount in the invoice, whether he is paying back to the government or we don't know. Now at least GST 2-year reconciliation, lot of disciplines put in place. So indirectly it makes us more responsible to country and government. And definitely the supplier or the service provider will also be in line with that.
Kishore Singh sir, your views?
Yeah, basically this is in a right direction. The government has taken this implementing the e-invoicing. Maybe we have seen the experience as of today, how it is working in the B2B transaction. If it once in a month to go, that if it is once it becomes seamlessly, possibly the industry may also come out to say that why not you just make a e-invoicing complete transaction. The B2B, B2C, everything, let it go through an IR and IRP type of a route, so that what happened, the monthly compliance become better. So rather than I just get something through type of an IR and something through my ERP system, it gets reported. Let every transaction goes via the government route, so that it gets the monthly compliance becomes seamlessly better for us. So hopefully the experience what we are gaining, we can share it with the industries, and also over a period of time we can also just go and ask the government, let every transaction be through an IRP portal and an IRP get generated, so that things will be seamlessly monthly returns can be filed on that.
Sunil ji, before hearing from you, 2 questions to you. One, will voluntarily taking up e-invoicing by a assessee less than the threshold at a later point in time, will he be incentivized by the global scenarios? 2, if I don't comply, what would happen? With that, your closure remarks.
So I think expecting an incentive for doing something, I'm not sure whether that is going to work. As of today, even that voluntary compliance is not permitted. So if you are not enabled on the portal, there's no mechanism where you can actually in fact, we had a few clients who wanted to test it, and it was they were not permitted to test also because it's not been enabled. Now, of course, last week they have enabled some people to in the test sandbox environment, but otherwise it's not enabled. So incentive is very far off. Even permitting on a voluntary basis will be a big thing at this current point of time. As far as non-compliance consequences, I've already discussed it earlier. At the supplier level, there can be penalties, and at the recipient level, there could be a risk of denial of input tax credit if we have some very strict officer and someone who really is a very a different type of a mindset. Then it can create a little bit of a difficulty.
I thank the panel, and I thank you all for effective coordination. Over to Secretary of SIRC, Abhishek Murliji. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ganesh. And I thank all the panelists. Truly wonderful session and a lot of great takeaways. I must add, one as a representative of the ICAI, definitely a lot of feedback that I listened to today. We will definitely try to take it up and represent from our end to see what they can help to improve, not only for CAs, but for the industry as well. The second thing, of course, as a chartered accountant, I was trying to identify where the opportunities exist to work with the industry experts like yourselves, and where we can, may add value. So I think we had good takeaways from both ends, and it's a very comprehensive sort of panel discussion that we had today, and very excellently led by CA Ganesh Prabhu. As a panelist, it's always great to hear the views, but a moderator should also do the groundwork and ensure the questions are not only engaging for the panelists, but for the participants as well. And I think he has done an excellent job. So I'd like to thank each person individually, the moderator, CA Ganesh Prabhu, CA Balasubramanian, CA Manikandeshwaran, of course, our expert, CA Sunil Gabhawala, and CA Kishore Singh sir. So all of you, thank you so much. Despite a very hectic schedule, very busy schedule, you all, graced your presence here and shared your thoughts, your insights with our members. We'll forever be grateful for this excellent session that we had today. And my dear members, I would be remiss if I don't thank all of you as well, who have kept it engaging, have been sharing your thoughts, your questions as well. And I'll also take this opportunity to invite everyone to join us again on 6th of November. We have a very, very interesting session where we invited the past Chief Economic Advisor for India, Dr. Arvind Subramanian, Professor of Ashoka University, will be addressing our members on 6th of November, along with former Union Minister Manish Shankar Iyer. This is for the Shankar Iyer Memorial Lecture. His father was a very renowned chartered accountant, was practicing, even though he's from Chennai, he was practicing in Delhi. And every year we have a memorial lecture in his memory, and that is held on 6th of November. It is a free program, so I request everyone to please do join for the program there. On 7th of November, we have another very important program, certification for projections and provisional statements. As a chartered accountant, there are certain regulatory impacts which are there. Many chartered accountants are not aware. We have a Central Council member, CA Aniket Talati, the chairman of the Financial Reporting and Review Board of ICAI, will be joining us. That's on 7th of November. Also a free program. So I request everyone to please register and join us for the program as well. So with this, we've come to the end of today's session. I thank all the participants once again, and I thank all the panelists and moderator for such a wonderful session. Thank you all. Stay home, stay safe, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you, then.